You mentioned about tech, which is a big part of what you guys do, and I know from a number of lenders that I've spoken to that they have a lot of admiration for your due diligence process. They've said to me that it sets you guys apart in terms of the deals that you bring live onto the platform. They have comfort in the fact that it's been assessed very, very carefully, and the team that you've built clearly lends itself towards that. I'm interested to know a little bit about the kind of technology that you have that you're deploying towards assessing deals. I kind of get, Andrew, why you said to Mike, we can't be completely tech driven because uh, you risk becoming almost like the corporate banks that you're trying to disrupt, because then you potentially might have the situation where you have a computer says no uh, predicament. So there needs to be definitely a balance. But talk me through some of the technology data sets that you guys are using, and why a lender, for example, someone like me who's looking to lend through the platform, you know, who may not have had as much exposure as some of the other lenders that I've spoken to. What talk me through some of that assessment that you do and the technology that you do to create this great due diligence process.
So this is, I mean, so first and foremost, as I mentioned, technology for efficiency, expertise for effectiveness of lending. So every bit of tech that we bring in, data, analytics, big data algorithms, and more machine learning, because the data sets are big enough now, is we're putting all of our all of the projects through all of that that pick out an immense array of data that then simplifies all that down to the key individual metrics or the key standout metrics that are then flagged to expert human brains. And £5 billion worth of applications gives us a very big sample size for a start. But we're using the best data, the best tech know-how, the best approaches in the market. And that's not only where we see and apply that, but also we bring in external data resources that I know very well as a venture capital investor in this in property space. To again enhance our data and decision-making inputs. So I won't go into specific elements to that, other than to say there is no doubt that we are leading the market in that data and analytics piece, but heavily caveated that the purpose of that is to serve expert human brains, not to make the decisions themselves.
Andrew, anything you want to add to that?
Only that that's the science of it, and the art is the human touch and the human expertise. And it's I've always been fascinated by the fact that if you do an estate management course, it's a BSc, and the argument I can remember when I was at college was actually it could be a BA, because it is you could turn up if you're a specialist in a particular area of the industry, you could turn up and know before you've got out of the car what the answer is. That's the art. You would apply the science to get there to prove your point. But early on in my career, I would be in a car with a partner, and we'd go to a building and he'd say, "What do you think this is worth?" And I'm thinking, "Well, I don't know." I'm just a junior person. And he'd say, "You'll get £6 a foot for this, and it would be worth about 50 quid a foot for capital value." And I'd be thinking, crikey. And of course, I'm now that person, I'm now him, and I'm thinking, yeah, I know the art into this, but I'll just check the science to make sure what I'm saying or thinking is correct.
That's exactly why the deep property experience is so vital, and it's so lacking in many lenders, because actually the data bit is the easy bit, right? You can carve that together and get better and better and refined viewpoints out of data, right? But I mean, I mean, I dare mention the word in front of Andrew, the word drainage, because Andrew will dig into this for hours, right? But there are so many elements that present fundamental risk factors on development sites that actually you only get to really know, understand, spot, look out for, and then work to mitigate. You can never remove necessarily, but mitigate through the process. And that's the art, and that's the expert team that we have.
Which kind of leads me nicely on to this. From your experience, what are the characteristics of a SME property developer bringing a deal onto the platform that has worked? What works? What's been successful in terms of raising finance, or is it that by the time the property developer comes to you guys, you assess the deal, you work with the developer, you've pretty much taken out all the sort of unknowns and the risks and the issues that could potentially make a raise less successful? Have you guys pretty much cracked it? Or is there something that property developers can still learn from others who have done it before?
Well, put it this way, I'm still learning stuff, okay, which is why I love the industry so much. But if a borrower comes on the phone to me and he is organised, he's focused, and he's target driven, then that ticks a lot of boxes. He might not necessarily know what those targets are that he's got to drive himself to hit, but we can help him with that, okay? But if he demonstrates the fact that he's put together a decent set of documents, he doesn't necessarily need to be that experienced, but he arrives with a team around him and introduces himself and tells us, these are the people who are helping me deliver this project, then you'll look at it and go, he's thought about this, he's put the team together, he's given me the information that I've requested, I've asked him for a bit more information because of the idiosyncrasies of this particular deal, okay, he's gone away and one of his consultants has provided that information, then all of a sudden he's 75% there to being for us to lend him the money, because he's focusing on that particular deal because that's the one that he's got. He's not running away and looking at others and thinking, well, that will sort itself out. He's taking us along with him, so we're effectively a part of that team now. We've got access to not just him, his team, so I can ring his architect up and say, have you done that yet? I don't need to go to the borrower. I can go to his architect and ask him, or his project manager, or whoever. And those are the sort of people we do business with. If the person comes to us with a deal which he's not quite got there yet, but we've looked at it and said, well, actually, if you take this route to get to your end game, then then it'll work and we'll support you, okay? And quite often they go away and come back and go, actually, great idea, we're going to go that way on it. So it's all, and you'll understand that a property project development or bridging loan evolves over a number of weeks. So when you've made your offer, it's based on the fact you might know the market, the fact that you've got a set of estate agents' details, the fact that you might have gone on to Rightmove and checked the sale prices of comparables, the fact that you've done a bit of a walk up and down the street, the fact that you've been on Street View, Google Maps, you've checked you might already know the economics of the area, but you don't know the actual detail until you have the time to spend on a survey, to spend time telling your architect what your vision is, so he can then draw it out, and that takes a little bit of time. But you've got that time during the legal process to bottom out what are your costs going to be, where are the risks, is your exit strategy correct, are the rents that you're expecting for those rooms correct, am I going to get a HMO license, all the different things that you would have to cross the once you've have thought of the strategy, made your offer, got an agreed set of terms, instructed solicitors, then you start working hard on the detail.
And to pick up just on the terminology there, there's not really a definition in our business of a successful raise, right? We've seen £5 billion pounds worth of projects. We've funded 120 million. What we approve through our rigorous processes gets funded because of our diverse sources of capital right across the board of capital types. The crucial thing is it a successful project? And that's what we work damn hard to understand, because that contributes largely to things: project itself and the individual undertaking it or team undertaking it. And that's where we will focus our due diligence. And then the other thing is that you won't solve all the problems before the project kicks off. Okay? You'll define mitigants to some of the risks and most of the risks. Things will emerge through the project, and that's why we're very active through that project in terms of monitoring, in terms of, nobody, I use the analogy, it's like nobody ever, partway through a project, phoned up Lloyd's Bank and said, oh, thanks for the money, by the way. Yeah, I've got this problem on site. Any chance you could, share some wisdom? And I mean, the chances of speaking to a human is low, let alone a human that understands anything about property and property projects and what your vision is trying to achieve. Whereas our team here, they're like, great, okay, cool. Yes, we've seen that many times. Okay, this is how to think about the problem. That's how to crack it. Or do you know what? That's a real challenge. Okay, we'll be on site tomorrow. Let's crack it together, because it's a team effort here.
I think that's quite an interesting point. I think, prior to the disruption of peer-to-peer lending and crowdfunding platforms, the only real lending you could secure is through the sort of traditional banks, if I can put it that way. And there was always this perception that it's us against them or them against us. And so when there was a problem, and bearing in mind, like any business, construction is fraught with problems. It's your ability to go through problem after problem and not let the last problem be your final problem, your final failure, is the art of being successful as being a developer, in my view. But when you didn't have that relationship and it was this them against us approach, whenever there is a problem, there is no dialogue with the banks, and so there isn't an ability to then work through the problems, maybe adjust some terms or the way that the project is done or what have you, in order to then still make the project successful at the end. And so as a result, I think we had post 0809 is this, right, there is a problem, there's no ability to negotiate or discuss and come to some solution, therefore it has to come to an end. And that's what a lot of the banks were doing. And then you have the other extreme where you have private investor funds who are getting in as equity joint venture basis. And in my personal view, I think a lot of them are very inexperienced, and certainly, I've acted for private investors or private lenders, and I'm very fearful of some, and I'm advising them, look, you got to be thinking about what happens in the worst case. As a lawyer, we live in the worst case scenario. So the worst case happens. Do you have the infrastructure to enforce the security, to reclaim? Can you throw good money after bad? And so that that's the other extreme. And I think you guys position yourself in the middle there, where you can have a dialogue with the developer borrower and work through those problems, because you're kind of sitting on the same side of the negotiating table, so to speak, is the way I kind of look at it, and work through those problems. But in recognition that there is still that first charge security. So as a lender, if things do go wrong, there is that first charge security there that will still afford some level of protection. I'm interested to know.
Just to pick up on that, because I think that's a really important point on the investor side. I see some investors out there, who are very good, by the way, who do a hell of a lot of due diligence. It's pretty much their full-time activity. Okay, and they're brilliant at doing due diligence for the elements that they want to lend at whatever point in the capital stack, right? But there's a load of people who do not have that time or expertise, etc. And effectively, the team of 41 here that's ever growing is exactly that. It's the due diligence filter. It's the ability to cut down 97% of projects, to focus on it. Then to process that both commercially and legally, then to monitor it, then to go into recoveries if necessary. All of that is effectively outsourced. And what you're able to do is get a first charge coupon return that then can be leveraged tax efficiently with an ISA or, say, SAS pensions, for example. It's very, and you can achieve the benefits of diversification without putting mountains of extra due diligence on yourself as an individual assessing that. It's incredibly powerful, but also just 2 points that you mentioned here. So going back to the borrower side of the debate here. So for SME developers, what happened in 09 and 10 was catastrophic. I mean, RBS basically accentuated the entire position by just repossessing and fire selling everything, okay, without a property brain. And you fast forward that, and whenever someone mentions RBS to me, it's like, that's what I think about, right? Brand reputation sticks, okay. Fast forward to the next economic challenge, and that was in 2020. And what we saw in the market was not only development lenders pulling their offers to developers, so not going through with them, but also refusing drawdowns on active projects, which basically just destroys the project because the developer has spent money and they're not getting the funds to be able to then pay their contractors. And the contractors say, well, look, where's the money, or for the materials or whatever it is. It's destructive. We've refinanced a number of those, both of those situations, or finance or refinance, should I say. And the main driver for that is actually a load of the market, the vast majority of the market, okay, has single sources of wholesale capital, right? So they'll have big pot of cash from a single source that they're deploying under their criteria, right? And the sources of that wholesale capital are often big asset managers that have other exposures, for example, into equity markets, okay? And in March, April, May, when equity markets went into huge volatility, okay, they said, well, look, my equity pot is, I don't know where it's going, right? So let's pause the debt pot, right? And they had no alternative than to stop lending. It was much more severe than many lenders let on, that they would just stop lending, right? The power of our model is that we had diverse sources of capital that sought yield. Okay, so whilst it wasn't for everyone, and obviously we were lending under much, significantly tighter criteria, and only for projects that needed to move forward or could move forward, and it was right for the economics and the borrower and the risk management of the overall exercise. Okay, we could lend, and that was totally differentiated in development finance markets because of the diverse source of capital. Now, I've been talking about diverse source of capital for 2-3 years and the power of it. I certainly didn't ask for a global pandemic to prove my points, but that's what happened. It proved that power because we were able to be uniquely reliable through 2020 in our funding.
one point that I want to pick up on. So you might have a credible developer borrower, and you have a viable project that, so long as it goes through to completion, and we don't have a crystal ball, but let's say the market holds up, you still got a viable product that will produce a return. The challenge is to make sure that you go through the construction, complete the project, and then refinance it or sell it at the end. But if the cash flow is pulled midway through, then you take a viable, credible developer, viable product, and kill it. Pretty much because there's a change in appetite from the underlying capital, underlying lender.
Yeah, exactly. And that was the issue of the market last year. And many people felt that pain. And whereas we were able to fund in that circumstance because of the unique makeup of our capital sources and the diversity, it wasn't for everyone lending last year, but because we reined back the criteria, because we tightened things up, because we did various things, sort of right down to sort of site operating procedure level, to make sure these developments could progress, we were a perfectly reliable funder. And as I said, the last 12 months, the average has been in the seconds, not in the minutes, of funding projects. But saying that, we, by definition, the fact that they are funding in seconds now means that we are still cautious about the projects that we lend to. They have to meet our criteria. We never flex our pipeline funnel criteria that reflect the supply and demand of capital. We only approve projects that fit our ever-tightening criteria.
I'm a big believer in the black box thinking. So and the ability to learn from failures and mistakes, preferably from somebody else's rather than your own. So talk me through some examples of where I get that you don't have a lot of unsuccessful raises. I appreciate the terminology may not be perfect, but talk me through then, for example, where the borrower developers have had a raise, they've had their cash come through, but they're perhaps not doing what they ought to be doing and giving you guys much more grief, much more work to do. Talk me through some of the things that borrower developers should be doing better, both before and also after raising funds.
So I'll just give you some examples. So they forget to sequence the ordering of materials correctly so that they've got to a particular point and they hadn't realized that the supply of the next material was going to be 12 weeks. Or, so a classic example of that is, was actually on a scheme I did through 5 years ago, maybe. And I happened to be in Dewson's, and because I like to think I'm organised, I happened to be at first floor level, and I went to look at ordering roof tiles. So I was still a bit away from having to be delivered. And the guy said to me, well, you can't get Marley tiles at the moment. They had a massive fire in Germany in their factory and you're never going to get them. So, okay, what are Redland doing? Okay, well, Redland run under a lot of pressure because they're getting all of Marley's stuff. Okay, so it was literally, right. So I had a 4 or 5 week lead in time and I was able to get the similar tile I wanted from Marley from Redland in that period. Okay, but I was literally the last lot of that particular style of tile to come out of the yard. So it's about being organised. At that time, the ordering of bricks was about 30 weeks. Okay, now if you don't have the foresight to think about these things, you'll get to site, you'll start digging the foundations, and you'll pour the concrete, and then you'll say to the bricklayer, right, you start next Monday, and they say, well, where are the bricks? So it's just things like that. But because, these are things that because we're building the case up with our borrower, we're saying, well, have you thought about where your bricks are coming from? Have you thought about, where your tiles are coming from? Have you thought about how much it's going to cost you to bring in the utilities, which everybody forgets? Because, it's all very well building some properties on the edge of a village, but actually, how do you know that the village has still got the power capacity to have another load of houses? And I always say, to my borrowers, for all I know, you might have to go and build a new power station, which makes this project completely unviable. And that the penny drops then. But there's things like that. So before we've even written the loan, we've had those discussions. Okay? Because what we want that borrower to commence work the day after we've written the loan. Because guess what? We're saving that borrower a shed load of interest on what is effectively a period of time before he starts on site, which he didn't need to suffer. Yeah. And by the way, we have other borrowers that come to us and say, I want to borrow some money for 6 months. And we don't laugh at him, but internally we do, because there's no way you can build and exit a deal in 6 months. Yeah. So we talk to them about the length of the loan, okay, to ensure that he doesn't go late, because we don't want him to go late. Because if he goes late, we've got 1,500 lenders on our backs for a start, saying, where's my money? And secondly, we want him to have a successful project, because if his project's successful, we get our money back, the lenders are all happy. The lenders come again when he returns for more business, okay? And he's had a brilliant project that's made him a load of money.
So take the roof tiles example there, multiply it by 100, okay? And that is, I don't know, a tenth of the number of problems you'll have on the site. And if you're entirely on your own, then that's going to be problematic. We get our borrowers feeding back that we have significantly added value and significantly increased both the probability of success of that project, but also the profitability of that project. And that's just the expertise point. If I was doing developments now, Andrew and our case managers, they would all be number one on my team sheet, because that is real expertise across 290 loans, across 200 projects. That breadth, and seeing 5 billion of applications, that breadth of expertise and understanding means that we've seen almost everything. Now, I caveat that slightly, because there are always edge cases, one-off unique things that we see, okay? And then it's about cracking those as they emerge. But it's cracking those with a positive, the right approach for this project is to solve the property problem and continue, not, right, let's lock this up, repossess it, and exit, like people, lenders who do not have that deep property expertise will resort to.